Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Eternal Possibility Hour, where I interview ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I am so pleased today to bring you Eden Saint-Clair from, well, from Zoom, but from Montana. And she is an energetic healer and studied in a metaphysical school for a really long time and taught there, and a tarot card reader and a dreamologist. And so I'm super excited to bring her on and share all of her lovely gifts with you. Hi, Eden.
Hi, Esther. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you are welcome. So, first off, I want people to get to know you. So, tell us a little bit about your background and all of these interesting, beautiful things that you bring to the world.
Sure. So I feel like I really lucked out because by the time that I was born, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And there were family circumstances that were very mystical that had happened. And they had cracked open my parents to the possibility of the fact that we are eternal beings having many lifetimes here on this planet, and that there are forms of divination or almost soul language that we can learn and communicate to our soul, and therefore communicate out into the world that we live in every day. So by the time I was born, my mom had already been a student of astrology for like 20 years. And I feel like I could read charts before I could read words. She just like poured all this information into me. And that just I feel like from the beginning, and I'm sure many people watching this will feel the same way, that the soul was the most important thing I could focus on in life. And I was just always curious, like, how does this feel my soul? How does this express my soul? What is the soul? How can I work it out? And it was just anything that I did kind of had that premise to it. And when I was 19 is when I found tarot, so a little over 20 years ago. And I just remember they still had tarot decks like locked in glass cases in bookstores. And it was so like taboo, but I just loved the language. I felt like the language of pictures was the language of the soul. It made so much sense to me, which led me then to live in this ashram at the School of Metaphysics, where we studied with pioneers in the dream industry, which again is a language of pictures. And that led me then to even want more and more and more. So I studied with Dr. Pamela Eakins at the Terra Nova Seminary, which is an interfaith seminary. She is housed out in California. And this took a 3-year journey of all the holy works from different countries and cultures, and showed their spiritual origin, and then tied that back into tarot. And probably the most important thing that happened for me in my journey was caregiving for my parents for 2 years while they were transitioning, and walking full time with that portal, that death portal, was something that made everything that I had studied become very concrete, very tangible, and supporting them in this liminal space between worlds really cracked my heart open even more. And so I feel like that really informs what I do with all of this divination and soul study work, is to be able to have walked that road with them. Taught me so much about what it means to be an eternal being.
Wow. So, it sounds like you really had this beautiful unfolding of knowledge being poured into you when you were really young, and then your own expression and your own physical and mental, emotional, spiritual learning and being in the metaphysical school, and then your parents actually dying, having 2 years. I mean, that's like school experience like none other.
It was intense on every level because I mean, and the way that people experience the end of life is different for every person. And like I said, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. So every one of us had a different perspective of what that meant. And being able to like stay steadfast with what I believe to be true for my parents in terms of it being uh, the fulfillment of their life rather than the ending of their life, and being witness with them while their souls stepped out of their body, and to really know that they were going on a journey, that they weren't ending, even though my experience with them was technically ending. Um, yeah, that is a space that really is only, I find, only available at end of life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what an honor to be the child. I'm sure your siblings were involved in some way, but to really be the child that was there for those 2 years and really present with every emotion and every thought and every permutation of humanity and divinity at the same time. What a gift.
Yeah, it changed everything for me. Definitely.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's very personal, and I appreciate you sharing that with me and with all those who will watch this series of interviews. So you talked about tarot and the language of, symbols. And so tell us just a little bit about tarot. I think tarot gets a little bit of a bad rap in the spiritual realm for being, you're talking about it being locked up in a case. So it gets a little bit like, I don't know, that's not safe. There's something a little strange. Reiki's good, but tarot, let's not go there. So can you normalize that for us?
Absolutely. Yes. So, tarot has a very long history, and that's, I think, where some things get convoluted along the way. And where we are right now is amazing because almost, many, many more people, it's kind of mainstream now. It's like, oh yeah, I have a deck in my back office. I pull a card every day, etc. And I think that's really beautiful. But what I think is the most important thing to know about tarot is that it's essentially a physicalized meditation. And every card has a story behind it and a relationship to all the other cards in the whole deck. And when we pull cards, what we're doing is getting to actually see the story of the energetics that we're living in the moment. And if we like that, there's tools in every card for us to magnify it. If we don't like it, there's tools in every card for us to heal it. So tarot is just an archetypal expression of our creative process as a human here. It starts with the element of fire, which is like spiritual inspiration. And then that inspiration spark moves us into our hearts. We become passionate about those things. And then it moves into our intellect and it says, oh, I want to design my life. I want to design this spiritual spark that I've just had. And then it moves out into our physical experience. And over again, these cards are just showing us patterns of the human experience. And when we put them together, they create sentences that are so easily interpreted and so affirming and healing to us that it's this amazing gateway that will reflect ourselves back to ourselves every step of the way. Even though I know there's some cards there that people think are scary, those cards really have spiritual meanings behind them, and they are very holistic and extremely nourishing, actually, instead of this fear that has been attached to them.
Okay. So let's just dive right into that. The death
Yeah.
card. I feel like that's the scariest card in the tarot deck, at least in my opinion, and I think others might agree. So talk to me about the death card.
Absolutely. So, this actually really relates to what I was saying with my parents, which is that we can even look at physical life as like the biggest transformation, the biggest sense of fulfillment and completion that we will ever experience. And we are going to always step into a new and greater form of who we are as eternal beings. When we pull the death card, it is rarely, unless the conditions of the life, I've done tarot for people who are at end of life, that would be kind of a different scenario. But the truth of the matter is that is called a major arcana card. The word arcana is a little bit intimidating. It just means wisdom. So it's a major wisdom. And what that means is that our soul is going through an initiation, an up-leveling that is going to absolutely transmute our life so that we have an entirely new experience of ourself in our physical world. And when we pull the death card, it means that we are going through almost like a 7-year cycle. You could look at it like, in science, they say in 7 years, not one cell of our body is the same. That the death card is symbolic that we are going through an extreme completion of a cycle of our life that we have been really devoted to, that we've been really growing, that we've nourished and nurtured. And that cycle is entering a winter stage. It's entering the stage where it's time for there to be no more productivity, no more creation, a cessation of everything that we have done. And the death card is saying it's time to winter. And depending on what else is in the spread, it's going to tell you what is wintering. And that completion always then has a spring on the other side, because there is no true end to any experience that we're having. It's always that next evolution, expansion, and really creation that we are going to be experiencing. But when we walk through the portal of the death card, we are going to see some things ending in our life that we may have put like that love and care into that I'm talking about. And if we can acknowledge it like a season, if we can acknowledge it like winter, we're going to have a completely different experience of that.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a pause or a resting point to really say, now I'm going to go into integration with this. I'm going to like reap the rewards of everything that I have put into this, whatever it is that I birthed, walked through, nourished, and then it's coming to an end, whether it be a relationship or a project or a job or a physical malady, something like that it could be. Um,
And
and
really, I was just going to say, really importantly, one of the things that doesn't always get talked about is our belief system about who we are. And that type of death or wintering is really, we don't necessarily talk about that often. Like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it quite a bit. You know, there's people out there that are talking about it, but that idea that we can actually change our personality, change the way we see ourselves, change the way we interact with the world. And to me, that's that will ripple out into these other things that you're describing, the ending potentially of a relationship, potentially of a career, potentially of a physical life circumstance. But at the end of the day, the invitation is always for us to be able to see ourselves in a new way.
yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. That really brings me some peace around the death card. It makes it seem so holistic, actually, in walking a human life. Um, I I think that sometimes there's some sadness that comes when things end. And sometimes when I experience that, I think, oh, that means that I shouldn't have ended it. Like that means because I'm sad or I'm missing this thing. So I just went through a sabbatical and all of my friends are getting up and doing and starting new projects. And I was like, oh, I'm not part of that thing. I'm really sad. And then wondering, should I be doing the thing? Should I be doing the thing when everything inside of me is saying, step back. It's your time to rest. They're doing their thing and it's okay that you're not doing it. And so what was helpful for me in that was to feel the sadness and know that it didn't mean that I was doing anything wrong.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful. In the end, in the past, I would have really followed those like, oh, I need to hold on. I need to hold on. I shouldn't stop this thing. I had a 9-year list that I was doing and I just stopped it. And I was so sad afterwards. And I'm still a little sad from that. But I know now, after experiencing this sabbatical, that it's not meant for me to continue. It's meant for me to rebirth in a new way. And so now I can see the new things starting. And this actual interview series is part of what came out of freeing the energy from that old project to kind of share in this new way. And so I think that if you're out there and you're listening and you're feeling sadness at the end of something, just know that that's part of the process and just honor that sadness and feel it and bless it and just let it go.
Mm. So wise. So that's so wise. And I think that one of the things that we can miss pretty easily is the almost art of ceremony with an ending. And one of the things I think that you do so well in your work is to be able to craft spaces where people can go inward and have an experience of ceremony. And I think that grief lingers at the ending, or that sadness one, like you're saying, we think, oh, something's wrong because I should be in perpetual spring. I should be producing something. If I'm not
And
producing,
happy.
amazing. And two things about that. One is in the tarot journey, always every suit has this arc to it of excitement of something new. And then we're growing, growing, growing. And then the dark night of the soul has to happen. And in that dark night of the soul, is where we actually come to know a deeper part of ourselves. But when we integrate ceremony and art like you do, and meditation, then we have tools and resources to help us stay with that moment in time and to recognize it just as a part of the experience of being human.
That's beautiful. I think it makes the whole process seem so much more safe and enjoyable, so that when things like a dark night of the soul happen, that you're not freaking out, thinking, oh my God, what is happening? So talk to us about Dark Night of the Soul. I think that is also something that gets kind of a bad rap. And I think that it's a really healing process. And it's really helpful to feel safe while you're there. So can you talk to us about that?
Oh, sure. It's a great question. Um, well, I can relate it also to tarot with two different cards specifically that pop to mind. One is the Tower, which is another tarot baddie that people are usually scared of. And the Tower is always symbolic of this time in our life where there's that insight that we need to restructure. That the things that we have put at the top of the tower, like the royalty of our life, now are no longer valuable. And so the tower kind of feels like it's falling apart. It is falling apart. And what's happening is that the kind of DNA of our life, or the building blocks of our life, are scattered out in front of us. And that moment of time when the tower falls and scatters is what I would describe as a dark night of the soul. And what the invitation is then to incorporate the card of the high priestess. She lives in what's called the abyss, which is where we cannot see or hear with our traditional eyes. We're going deep and deep and deep into who we are. We're going into deep contemplation, deep meditation, deep stillness or pause, as you said. And we start to develop almost new eyes to see, these spiritual eyes to see. It's almost like we're developing like sonic expression of following our intuition forward. And I always feel that dark nights of the soul are there for us to refine that intuitive sense that we are becoming almost like Spider-Man or something, where we're starting to understand the frequencies or the vibration of what's actually happening for us in that moment. And there's always an invitation towards greater authenticity. When that tower moment happens, there's usually something that we have lived with for a long time that isn't really in alignment with our truest self. And it isn't that we never rebuild the structure. We just need to reformat what is the most in integrity with who we really are. And so when that moment happens in the dark night of the soul, it can feel, isolating, or like sometimes there can be that sense of hopelessness, but it's only because we haven't grown those new eyes yet to see. And nothing is lost, it's reformatted.
And the new eyes to see, it sounds like, comes through our five, six senses, right? To really feel the connection. To me, it feels like I get what I call angel hugs. And so it's when somebody's speaking to me and they're telling me something that I can tell is really just true and profound, then I'll get this like tingling sensation all over my body or right around my head or in different parts of me. And I can tell that something momentous is happening. And so I think, there's, taste and sight and hearing and smelling and touching and all of that. But then there's this sixth sense. And it sounds like it's developing that sixth sense to know that there's something out there besides this 3D, this desk, this computer, this pen. There's something else out there that's saying, pay attention.
Such a great analogy, because we are taught that our intuition is like the abyss. It's like the wilderness. There's no control over it. We can't direct it, etc. And that feels very unstable. And the truth of the matter is that it is those eyes to see, or allowing those sensations to lead us, that we plug into the sublime plan, the sublime cosmic clock of what's happening. And when we can surrender to that and kind of become like the Tao and arrive every step of the moment with our presence, we begin to see from a different perspective. And just like you said, trusting that intuition, trusting those senses leads us to greater and greater evolutions of our inner alignment and profound integrity.
Yeah, something that my coaching mentor, because I'm now coaching people, as you know, so one of the really fantastic statements that she said is that nothing has gone wrong. And that's so helpful to me. And I think going through anything in your life, nothing has gone wrong. And the reason nothing has gone wrong is because we are eternal beings and we are constantly connected to our source light. And if we can turn towards it and we can turn away from it. And so I think that developing that body sense and really listening to our body as the antenna to the universe and all that is so helpful. And leaning into that and not just dismissing it as like, oh, well, that didn't mean anything. That's not, that's a little bit too weird. So I'm not going to pay attention, when it's really like your true self saying, wake up, pay attention. This is important.
Yeah, we dismiss our bodies quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I
So
share a card with you.
yes, please do. I would love that. And let me pin you for a second because I want people to really be able to see this. Oh, where are my controls? There you are. Okay.
So before we started, I pulled this card, which is the star.
It's
And
beautiful.
it's exactly what you're describing, which is that you can see, like, as above, so below, what we're experiencing, and our eternal being self, this luminous light of individuality and spirituality at the same time, radiating out into the physical world. And exactly what you're describing, which is that we start to learn what all these frequencies are, what are all these vibrations, what is my inner North Star, my individuality actually pulling me towards. And that is the gift that comes out of what we were talking about, the dark night of the soul, those pauses. The gift is to cleanse anything that might be blocking this inner light or this inner individuality that is really here to shine from this holistic sense and to lead us moment by moment through this body sensory experience, intuitive sense experience. And the whole point is that we can then be so free and experience that joy of the radiance of who we're here to be and live and trust that individual spark. I keep saying that word because I think it can be a little intimidating sometimes to really be fully ourself, fully our authentic self, our 360-degree self or whatever. And this star is all about trusting that, allowing this alignment to come in and to be one with our spiritual being as having a physical experience. And that would be the ultimate result of having a dark night of the soul.
Wow. Thank you. That card is beautiful.
I think this is Dr. Pamela Eakins. She and her mom designed this deck. It's called Tarot of the Spirit. So beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. It reminds me of seeing a tree reflected in water. When you have the tree up and it's seamless. There's just a trunk that goes forever down below, and then the leaves are on top and the leaves are below, and it's just so flowing and beautiful and connected.
Love that image.
Yeah.
Too.
So this is a really personal question, so you can decline to answer, but I'm wondering if you have an example of a dark night of the soul that you could feel okay sharing with everybody.
Yeah. So I feel like I have so many. How do I choose one? I feel like that after my parents passed away, there was a really extreme situation that happened with the execution of the will. And my life really could potentially feel very unstable because of different dynamics that were happening in the family with choices that were made by the individual executing that will. And it put me in the point of everything that I had known ancestrally, everything I've been taught, being up for evaluation, everything I'd been taught as far as what life was about my role in the family. Therefore, what I learned about my role in the family then kind of emanated out into my role into the world. And everything went away. Everything that I had ever known kind of went away. And that caused there to be some health issues on the other side of that too. And what ended up happening was the way I would describe it is that I didn't have the right feet to walk the terrain of life that I was in. And I kept trying to live life the way I had been doing it, how I had known myself, but everything was different. All my relationships were different. I was like cellularly different because now there was no tether to ancestry in the way that it had been. And so I was still trying to do life the way I had remembered doing it, and it wasn't working. The universe was like, nope, door closed, door closed, door closed. And it was intimidating. And to be able to say, okay, because it's kind of like you were saying, other people are doing things, other people are succeeding. Like I need to get back on this like creation wheel. I got to get back onto this success escalator thing, and that was not working. And so it required months and months, if not a year and a half ish of time to be okay learning how to walk in life again, and to be able to take time to grieve everything I thought I had known, everything I thought I'd known about myself, and to go into long extended periods of time of meditation, contemplation, and holding the new person in my body. Because that was the weirdest part, was that my frequency felt different, my vibration felt different, and I had to actually build the space in my body to hold the new vibration as it went through. And that required lots of quiet, required like destimulation, and lots of inner inquiry, which, we're not used to asking for. I'm not used to. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm wondering, there's been a lot of turmoil in the world, with school shootings and tornadoes ripping people's houses apart. And I feel like that is a real physical dark night of the soul. You've lost everything. You have your body, you might have your family, and you might not have your family, and like where to go. So I'm wondering if you, from your experience, have some tips. It sounds like such a silly little lighthearted thing to say. Do you have some tips? Some tips for going through losing your house and your life and your people? Is there something you have that would be helpful to them in their dark night of the soul?
Yeah. Um, I have had loss on that scale also. And I think that one of the most important things was to be so honest about what I was feeling. And even if it was not like my positive mindset self, to get real. And when I was angry or I felt betrayed by God, it wasn't even really God, it was almost more like I felt betrayed by my soul. Like, how could my soul let this experience happen to me? Like, how could, and to go out, I remember going out into the trees and screaming at trees. I remember like smashing glassware or things, which are really not really the biggest part of who I am, but it is an honest part of who I am. And to recognize that those emotions are an important doorway to self-honoring. And that I think that when we have these tremendous losses where we're stopped in our tracks and we have to evaluate what is next, that it's one, important to be honest, like I said. And then two, it's important to remember that we are resilient and we can recreate ourselves all the time. There's something, we were just talking a little bit about, redefining our identity. And part of what those moments do for us is to decide who are we going to be in that moment. And it becomes a real moment to moment experience. Like the acute crisis is happening. And we say, I get to choose who I get to be in this acute crisis, moment by moment. I'm not going to blame. After I get angry and I get it all out, I'm going to choose to not blame the scenario. I'm going to choose to not blame my soul. I'm going to choose to not blame God. And I'm going to claim my power, which is creative and resilient and loving and forgiving. And that in every moment, I get to be that new person and practice what is the next level of self that I can be. And it is a tough practice because you can't move time faster than you want it to. And it really is moment by moment. And that whole thing of the only real true reality is the present moment is what those acute crises show.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful um, opportunity to really discover your true self when you can let go of all of the 3D reality, the blame, the guilt, the shame, and you can really just become super, super present and say, okay, what's actually happening? What am I actually feeling? What is my next best step?
Yeah.
Who do I want to be and who do I want to show up as in this moment? Especially when you feel as if your entire identity, like you were talking about, has just been wiped off the face of your, like it was a dry erase board, and your entire life, your ancestry, everything was like gone. And you're left with this blank open slate. And I think it can be really terrifying. It can
Yeah.
feel really terrifying and ungrounding and unmooring to be, whipped about in the winds. And it's helpful to, when you get done screaming at the trees, it might be helpful to hug the trees and know that they are rooted, grounded beings that withstand storms and weather and have a lot of wisdom to share.
Yeah, I love that. I used to joke that my life felt like an Etch-a-Sketch. That like I'd spend all this time like designing, and then like, okay, start over. And I think oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, tell me.
I was gonna say, to add to that idea of the blank slate, is sometimes our soul has learned the lesson before the physical experience completes, like on our human scale. Like sometimes it's like, okay, you got what you needed as a soul. You don't need to continue on this physical experience. So then that's when it feels like the universe is etch-a-sketching us and like starting over. But we're like, we didn't finish this thing that is my identity. And that blank slate can feel really intimidating. And I think, to me, what I observe in working with people and working with myself is that trust in our capacity to be resilient and creative and recreate ourselves is the thing that assuages anxiety. There's so much anxiety also in our world now, and this idea of looming fear. And to me, that imagined or what if kind of fear, even in when things are really bad and they are happening, there's so much power in being able to trust that we can create again. And that when we know that anxiety can calm down just a little bit. And like you're saying, we remember that we are an eternal being having a physical experience, and that choice to be who we want to be in every moment causes us to be creative, and therefore assuages that anxiety step by step.
Yeah. And I feel that even when we, rail against God or yell at our children or, you know, we're mean to a clerk in a store, that next moment, we get to make that choice again and again and again and again. And holding on to those moments of pain, or maybe we were acting not so loving, just perpetuates unloving thoughts and unloving feelings about ourselves and the world. And that's not helpful. So, yeah, I think it's through the coaching and mentoring that I went through this past year in learning, it's just like, what is helpful and what is not helpful? Let's do the helpful things because
Yeah, totally.
it just makes everything better and makes you feel better faster. And don't we all want to feel better faster?
Please, yes.
So, could you share with us what beautiful seeds and pieces of wisdom came out of that dark night of the soul for you? Like, what was it you talked about feeling unmoored and like you had no identity and walking through that process? So then what was the other side of that? Like it's because it's been some time now since your parents passed and you've really been on this road for quite a while. So share with us what's new and brilliant and fabulous about yourself and your world.
I would say that if I could sum it up in a word, it's permission, for to just be all the things that were misunderstood about myself. And every one of these dark night of the souls has been like a realignment towards greater and greater authentic expression. And I think that what is coming up now is that claiming of all of this work that I've done in the mystical realm actually is what I'm here to do. It's not like a back door that I like have to go and be like, oh, and I do this thing, or like I don't have to prove it and anymore. Like I felt like there was always a lot of proving going on before that. And so this kind of ease and freedom of self-expression and creativity and authenticity, I think, is always the win on the other side of these experiences. When you learn to grow those new feet or those new eyes, you see, I mean, of course, it will happen again and again, but there is this freedom, I think, that comes out of it.
It's so beautiful. A really claiming of your true authentic self, and being open to doing the work that you're called to do in the world without caring what anybody thinks about about what you're doing. Super freeing. So share with me, what is it, if people who are watching this are saying, oh my gosh, she's a mystical priestess, which is what I think you are. How can I work with Eden? How can they work with you? Tell me.
Okay, well, one of the things we were going to talk about, I'm sure we're going to continue, is the dream interpretation. And I feel like one of the things that I love about dream interpretation is it is that step-by-step real-time expression of your soul that you create from your inside out and gift your conscious mind with this roadmap of how you're using your consciousness. So it's one of my favorite introductory ways to work with people is to help them learn to interpret their dreams or to support them interpreting their dreams, because there's this beautiful universal language that underpins every dream that we have. And when we get to know what that is, we can move through those dark nights of the soul with greater ease and flow, because we're like, oh, this is what's really happening. And now I can make tweaks in my daily life based on what my dream is doing. So that's one way. Of course, I love doing tarot readings. I do lots of one-on-one tarot readings. And then I do what I call mystery coaching, which is one-on-one sessions where we go into your energetic system as well. And sometimes past life things come through. We can reestablish and cleanse your energy field, which is really about you getting to know yourself more intimately. Anything that we're doing, always giving you back to you. I think that's really the most important thing, is that I fully believe that everyone is their own star. And what a mystery coach is to me is someone that's clearing the mystery between our conscious and subconscious mind, or our personality and our soul. And I have so many resources that I can be supporting an individual with, so that they actually see their soul and their eternal being and can translate that and integrate it out into their physical life.
Wow, it's so beautiful. It sounds like you would be a really fabulous person if I were wanting to figure out what those sixth sense sensations were and what they were telling me, and how to navigate a new identity if that's what's coming up in my life, or a loss or something. That this type of coaching, and even just the tarot reading, and or the dreams, any one of them, all three of them, they would be perfect supportive modalities to really feel held and supported, and to get to know a new landscape of yourself.
You just said that so well. I think that's really what I'm passionate about, is supporting people so they don't feel like they have to just stay in that contraction or stay in that old identity, that they can have support in the transition into their new self. Sometimes people come to me because they've had these mystical experiences when they were a kid and they had to shut them down based on their environments or fears, etc. And then they get to reawaken that they actually had them to begin with, and they can realign with them. And then, of course, I just really believe that I want really everyone to experience that freedom of the next level of who they really are. And sometimes that can be scary, because that means our physical life circumstances change. When we really get to know ourselves, our physical life has to change, because now we know that we know. And I love supporting people through that process, because it's so liberating on the other side.
That's so beautiful. So I have been taking Eden's Dreamology course, and it has changed my world. Because I've had really crazy dreams over the years, and people always say, write down your dreams and look in the dream books that tell you this means that, your teeth falling out, you're showing up naked in school, whatever it is. Those dreams that are kind of quintessential human dreams. And never really made much sense to me. And writing my dreams down never gave me any real guidance or clarity until I started taking your Dreamology course, because Oh my gosh, Eden, there really is a language to dreams. And can you talk a little bit about that? And you have an upcoming workshop. So tell us about your free offering that it will introduce to people really so much more about this than what we're going to have time to talk about today.
Absolutely. So I'll start with talking about the language of dreams that we're going to be working with in this Dreamology workshop, which is on April 19th. I'm double checking. Yes, April 19th at 5:30 Mountain Time. I'm in Mountain Time. And what the whole language of dreams that works so well and why it helps people to have kind of scary or unsettling dreams is that two things. One is that every person, place, and thing is a representation or a symbol of how you're using your consciousness in your daily world about 24 to 48 hours before you have that dream. And your dreams are there mirroring back to you. Did you know that you had this fear going on? Did you know that you had this habit going on? Did you know you were living in that state of consciousness? And that's really what your soul is telling you in your dream every step of the way. And the second thing that's important about them is that we use the symbols as their purpose or their function in waking life. And so it's not really a random, like, or an emotional response per se. It's like, oh, how does that thing actually work in physical life? Well, that's telling me what I'm doing in my consciousness. And so we can take any combinations of symbols that you have in a dream and distill them down into a pure sentence, and it will always mirror back to you exactly how you're using your mind every day.
Wow, that is incredible. And that has been my experience. So I'm really going to put you on the spot here and
Okay.
have you do a little dream interpretation for everybody right now. So I had this crazy dream this weekend, crazy dream, where there were these three giant snow bunnies made out of snow, but they were animated, but they were the size of a room. We're talking 14 feet long and 12 feet tall and enormous snow bunnies. And then my husband came by with groceries from the co-op or the organic store, and he had these celery with greens and carrots with greens, and they were, of course, gigantic. And the bunnies took them and started eating the greens and eating, nibbling on the carrot and little tiny bites, but it was an enormous carrot. And okay, so what do you think about that?
I love it so much.
Is that just because Easter was here? Is that why I'm dreaming about snow bunnies? Am I hungry in my sleep? Tell me.
Amazing. So animals in a dream are always symbolic of compulsions or rituals that we do in life. They could even call them habits. And there's nothing wrong with a habit. It's just something that you want to know you're doing. If you're habitually or compulsively doing something, it's nice to know that that's happening. And when they're giants, they are giant habits. House size habits or compulsions, or it could even be intuition, could be like intuitive ways that we work in the world. And in this case, they're made out of snow, and snow is clearly frozen water, condensed water. And water in a dream is symbolic of our conscious or waking life experience. So just to give you an example, if somebody feels like they're overwhelmed by water in a dream, then they will feel overwhelmed in their life experience. Or if they're like swimming and they're jet propelling through the water, they're feeling so at ease and so excited and so in the flow of their life. So in this case, we have frozen water in the shape or in an animated habit. So it's, you can look at this as places in your life where you feel either stagnant or frozen or literally habitual, like this is the only way I do things. And it's like this every time. And you can decide about a bunny. You can think rabbits, they are about abundance. They're about productivity. They're joyful. They're cuddly. They're kind of like food for everybody else. So they're like this generation. They generate energy for others. They're kind of low on the food chain there. And so these habits that you have they're really getting your attention, where you're like, is this how I want to be living my life every day? Like almost like when they're that big too, there's this objectivity. It's like, I really need to look at this. And this is what my life looks like. Do I want it to continue to look that way? And in your husband coming in, he is symbolic of your whole mind, like your inner and outer self. And he is bringing them giant organic vegetables. So you are feeding these habits pretty intentionally. and you're feeding them with, high value nutrients. And so you could look at this like, I invest a lot of time into this way of being. I invest a lot of energy and education and nutrients into this way of being. And I have to decide now if I like this system of living. And so I looked at the dream like the last 24 to 48 hours before you had that and be like, was I thinking about places where I kind of habitually think I need to live life a certain way? And how do I really feel about that? And then implementing that would be really evaluating it and deciding if that's feels nourishing to you to continue on in that way.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So if these bunnies show up, it's not saying, oh, you need to change this habit, you need to find it, you need to root it out, you need to get rid of it, right? So it's just a point of awareness.
Absolutely.
Is
It's always
that
a mirror.
true?
Yeah, always a mirror. And you, as a conscious director, get to choose what you think about it.
Wow, fascinating. So if people don't know what their dreams mean and they had just three symbols, if you could give them just three powerful symbols to say, okay, if you know this, this, and this, you can start to have a different thought process about your dreaming world, what would those be?
Great question. So I think one of the most important symbols that people will see over and over again is a house or a room that they're in. And that is always about the state of mind that you're living in. So if you have a mansion, it's like a really expanded state of mind that you were in. If you have like a little dilapidated shed that you're trying to navigate around, you're living kind of in this maybe depressed or limited state of consciousness. And so looking and seeing what the rooms are like, what the housing is like, is one way you can immediately start interpreting your dreams. The other thing is looking to see who is in your dreams. If there are people that you know, then they are symbolic of qualities of consciousness within yourself. What do I mean by quality of consciousness? Could be you can determine an adjective that relates to the person that you know. And that is the piece of you that you are employing that day. So that, like, let's say that I dreamt about someone that I know who's spontaneous and fun. Well, then if I dream about that person, I was employing the spontaneous and fun part of myself. And so then if I see what house I'm in, I can start to put these words together and say, oh, I was being really spontaneous and fun in my mansion house. And that is causing me to have a really expanded state of mind. And then probably another one that would be pretty obvious, or I mean, repetitive, would be food in the dream. And so how we are engaging with food, that's about knowledge that we're feeding ourselves. So let's just say we could twist this dream a little bit and say that there was like Oreos or Twinkies being eaten in this expanded state of consciousness. Well, it could feel really good, but maybe we're not really feeding our soul all the way versus having those organic vegetables in there. So these are three things that you'll see pretty commonly. And you can always ask yourself how you're feeding your soul, how you're nourishing yourself, in what state of mind, and with what qualities of consciousness.
Wow, fabulous. Yeah, I feel like those show up a lot. For me in my dreams anyway. So do you have just something for maybe somebody's watching, they're saying, well, this sounds fascinating, but I don't dream at all.
Yeah. So remembering our dreams, they do sleep studies all the time that we're entering into that brain wave state where dreams are always happening. And the reason we don't remember is mostly about how we use our attention. So most of us are like going to sleep, maybe crashing out if we don't have good sleep hygiene. We're so tired, we just crash out. And then the alarm goes off and we just bounce back up and we go into our day. Well, what's happening when we're dreaming is our attention is moving into the inner levels. So right now we're having a physical conversation. All of our attention is here. Most of it is here in this physical world. When we go to sleep, we're moving our attention into the inner levels, similar to what you would do when you're meditating. And if you can gradually go to sleep with the expectation that you're going to stay conscious while you're going to sleep, doesn't mean you're not going to be rested, though sometimes dreams are a little tiring. And then when you're waking up, you could even set your alarm for like 2 snooze cycles ahead of time so that you're gradually waking up and holding your attention both in the dream state and the waking state. That's one thing that I would say that you could do. The other thing you could do is to become very present in your day, setting like an alarm every few hours to just stop for a minute. and be like, what does this chair feel like? What is the temperature in the room? What am I seeing in front of me? Because the more concentrated you are and the more the director of your concentration you are, the easier it is to start dreaming.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I especially love that last one because it brings you more mindfulness. And it's a really great way to use your senses to ground yourself in your present reality, in your body, in your space, and to really start noticing and expanding your awareness of what's happening instead of just assuming. I've seen a desk 1,000 times. I know what this desk is. I know what it looks like, but to really become present with it and what it feels like, and it may be a completely different experience if you put some real concentrated attention to it.
So
So I
I'm
can see
curious.
how that would, yeah, I could see how that can translate into your sleeping time, with what you're, how you're spending your mental energy during your waking moments.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm curious for you, what have you noticed since you've been tracking your dreams for a little while now?
Oh, I'm starting to notice that recurring symbols, and having an idea of what, now having some knowledge about what those recurring symbols are. Food shows up all the time, particular people show up. And before I thought, well, oh, so and so showed up in my mind from my past and then my dream from the past, so therefore I need to contact that person. And now I say, oh, what aspect of that is of me, and how am I relating to that aspect of myself now? And it's really been freeing because my dreams are like going to the movies every night, bring 3 tubs of popcorn and settle in because you are in for a ride. I mean, I could tell you 6 different scenarios, each with like multiple scenes, 25 people, all the colors, all the smells, like everything.
I want
And now I'm not so afraid of all of that happening and thinking, gosh, there must really be something wrong with me if that's what's happening in my sleep. And so I feel a lot safer.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a really amazing journey and I'm loving it. And we're only the first month into your 4-month subscription, which people will learn about if they come to the Dreamology workshop. So, do you have a subscription on your website as well? When
I
I
do.
linked that? Okay, so people will be able to find that even if they can't make it to the free offering, they can still join.
For
Okay.
sure. Always reach out to me if they have more questions and we can do a one-on-one and talk about it. So
Yes, so exciting. Eden, I am so grateful that you wanted to talk to me. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I am so excited to see what else you bring to the world with your many, many, many amazing gifts and the amazing journey that you've had so far in life.
well, I just so appreciate the conversation too. It's not something you do every day to have these kind of profound inquiries. And I love having the space and of course love sharing time with you. So thank you so much.
Yes, you are welcome. All right, everybody. I hope that you get excited about your dreams and maybe go to Eden's workshop and maybe investigate tarot, possibly. Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.